You welcome in movie recap. Turn on subtitles and let's get started. Always remember that perseverance and dedication in work are the keys to success. Today's film begins in San Francisco in 1981 with Chris and his son. Chris works as a sales representative for X-ray machines. Every morning, he takes his son to school and goes to all the hospitals he can sell X-ray machines. Unfortunately, he cannot sell the devices easily because they are expensive and not as efficient as existing devices. Like a new X-ray machine, he has to sell at least 2 machines a month to be able to pay the rent and house expenses. Chris rides the buses and leaves his car due to many parking violations, and he has no money to pay. And he meets this homeless person, and he thinks that the X-ray machine that Chris owns is a time machine, and he wants to take it from him. It's a bad day. He contacts his wife, Linda, to tell her to pick up their son from school because he doesn't have time. Linda gets angry, saying she's tired and working 2 jobs so they can make it. Covering their expenses, they do not even have the necessary expenses to pay the fines for the car that Chris parks anywhere because he is always in a hurry. But the problem is that he hasn't done anything for a while. At the end of the day in their house, Chris finds the Rubik's Cube brought by his wife, and at night he tries to solve it and solves it quickly without taking much time to complete it. The next morning, Chris was walking down the street and met a man coming from a beautiful, expensive car. Chris asks what she's doing and says he's a stockbroker. In the stock market, that is. Chris knows you don't need a college degree to work this job. This is important. He must be good at dealing with numbers and deal with people in a nice way. This makes him think about the matter, and his only dream is to leave work and become happy like all the people around him. The next morning, he tells his wife that he will go to the stock exchange office and ask for a job with them because this has been his dream since he was young. But his wife tells him to focus on his work and sell a lot because they need money and because they have many obligations and that she is tired from so much work. Chris goes to the stock market and leaves the X-ray machine with a homeless person on the street so he can go in and meet with HR. During a job interview, he sees that the homeless woman took the device and walked away. Chris leaves the interview and runs after her, but unfortunately he does not catch her, then leaves. The next morning, Chris sends his son to daycare. Chris goes to the gym, fills out the form, and meets Jay there, the head of recruitment. Chris is trying to get the job. He learns they only accept 20 people every 6 months and promises to get them started. He returns to complete his work and tries to sell the X-ray machine, but he sees the homeless woman who stole the device from him, so he runs after her. We go back in time and see that Chris bought a lot of X-ray machines, and he was the only one selling them. This device was a revolutionary invention at the time, but over time the device became no longer important in hospitals, and finally Chris is able to arrest the homeless woman and take the stolen device from her. Chris comes home with 2 devices, and the number of devices in the house increases. His wife is sad but says nothing because it is their son's birthday. Chris tells Linda about the homeless woman who stole the device from him, but Linda says that she is angry and does not bear much responsibility, so she leaves and walks away. A month later, Chris waits for someone to come under the desk to talk to him because he has been waiting for the interview for a month. But Jay is in a hurry and Chris goes with him, and Chris tries to convince him to do so. He is suitable for the job and that he is good at numbers, and he talks about his skills, but Jay focuses on the Rubik's Cube, and Chris offers to help him solve the Rubik's Cube, and he was able to solve it before they arrived, and Jay was amazed by that. He gets out of the taxi and is supposed to pay Chris, but he has no money, so Chris is forced to run until he reaches the metro, and he manages to get in before the doors close, but he is unable to take the device to the metro, so he falls from it and feels very sad. He talks to Linda to apologize to her, but is shocked when she says that she will leave the house and we will take their son because she is not happy. Chris returns home quickly, but unfortunately it is too late. Linda is gone. Chris gets a call and learns work starts tomorrow. In the morning, he goes to his wife's workplace and tries to find out from her the reason. She says that he is the reason for the collapse of the family and that she is no longer happy with him. Chris tells her that he will not leave his son and that he will take his son from nursery and return home, but Chris is in a very bad financial situation. At this time, the owner of the house comes to collect the rent, but Chris is broke, and he makes an agreement to wait for a week in exchange for painting the house. In the morning, Chris starts painting the house, but the police arrive to take him to the police station to pay all the car fines, but the policeman tells him that he has to stay at the police station until the investigation is repeated in the morning. He tries to tell him that he has a job interview tomorrow, but the officer refuses and only allows him to phone. Chris talks to Linda and asks her to pick up their son from nursery. The next morning, Chris went out, but he was late for his job interview. He runs around and doesn't even change his clothes and tries to justify his clothes. But Chris is smart and funny and decides to tell the truth and is able to convince the officials. After the interview, he learns that he will enter a training course and that it will be without salary, and that he must study in order to succeed in it. Chris is hesitant because the course is without money and because he must outperform 20 trainees in 6 months to be able to win the job, and tells Jay he will talk again and give him the final answer. He returns home and his wife returns with their son and tells Chris that she will travel to New York with her sister and that she will take their son with her. Chris insists on leaving their son with him and Linda agrees and goes. Chris calls Jay and says he agrees to attend the course. The next day, he prepares his bags and goes to the hotel next to the training course, takes his son to play basketball, and tells him that we are the ones doing this job, and no matter how difficult the circumstances are, do not allow anyone to tell you what you should do. Then he goes to the hospital and manages to sell an X-ray machine and take the money that is enough for them to live on. The next day, in the morning during training, Chris learns a lot about business, which is difficult, but Chris tries to prove himself. No one knows that he is poor. In the morning, Chris meets with a company's president and tries to establish relations, but Chris sees the man who stole the X-ray machine from the subway trying to catch up with him, but he falls to the ground by a car. His shoes were lost, but he goes back to training. The next day, he brings coffee to the manager and all his requests. He makes a lot of business calls. He is very busy between studying, training, home, and work. He goes to sleep and wakes up early to see his son and make calls. Because one of the rules of the course is that any trainee who is able to conclude a deal with a large amount within 6 months will be automatically appointed. Chris was working hard and was making calls all the time without drinking water or going to the bathroom. Chris thinks he chooses special numbers that will be for the rich man. Indeed, he succeeded and got an appointment with Director Rybin after 20 minutes, and Chris was very happy. But the office manager meets him and asks him to park the car. Chris can't refuse and has no choice but to agree and tries to park it quickly because the streets are crowded. After some difficulty, he finished the task and ran to catch the meeting, but he was late and the meeting was cancelled. But Chris didn't give up. The next day he takes his son and goes to Rapin's house and explains to him what happened and apologizes. Chris tells his son that he finished his work and he can take him to the soccer game. Rybin told him that he would take his children to the match as well and that he could come with him. There Chris is trying to communicate and get to know Rybin's friends. After a few weeks, Chris sold all his radiology equipment and his financial situation improved. But tax day comes, and because Chris has violations and doesn't pay, they withdraw all the taxes from his bank account, and Chris is bankrupt again. He goes to the owner of the house to take the money he borrowed from Chris, but he says he paid it before and closes the door in his face. Chris has no rent money and could be on the street at any time. He and his son go to the park and find the person who stole the X-ray machine from him in the subway. Chris grabs him and takes the X-ray machine from him, and he goes to sell it. Unfortunately, the device does not work and he feels sad, but he is surprised that the hotel owner kicked them out and left their bags outside. Chris tries to open the door or even enter through the window, but he cannot. Unfortunately, they are homeless, so he goes to the metro station with his son, and Chris tries to play with his son so that he does not become sad. They sleep in the subway bathroom. Chris cries after his son goes to sleep. In the morning, Chris goes to a homeless shelter to live there, but it turns out that it is only for women and children, and he knows where the men's shelter is and must find a place for himself. Chris quickly goes and finds a big line, and after a long wait, there are only 4 places left, and there is someone trying to take his place. But people testify with Chris and his son and enter the shelter. The place is very difficult and Chris tries to fix the device, but he does not know how and continues studying until retraining. Every day he tries to explain why he came to training with bags, and the days pass. Chris is trying to gain new clients and increase his study time until exam day comes. Chris is very nervous, but he is able to finish the exam quickly. He meets Mr. Zach and wants $5 from him to pay for a taxi. The money with Chris is not much, but he still gives him the money and Chris returns with his son to the shelter. But he cannot find a place to stay. Chris and his son go to eat and sleep in Qatar. Chris can't find a way to get the money. He is forced to donate blood in order to get money. He buys spare parts and repairs the X-ray machine. He went to the shelter again and was able to find a place. The X-ray machine was also repaired. The next day, he was able to sell it to the doctor, go stay in a hotel, and finally feel happy. The next day, he goes to the beach and takes a vacation. Then Chris goes back to training again and meets Jay. He realizes that he can get many clients and work hard at his job, and he knows that the next day they will choose who is accepted for the job. A day later, Chris meets with the committee and Zach is there. He is very happy with him and gives him the $5 he took from him. He knows this was part of the exam. Chris is very happy. He cries with joy and quickly goes to his son and hugs him to be the first to know of his success. Chris works in Dean Witter's office, and after a while he manages to start his own company. Investments in 1978. In 26, Chris was able to sell part of his company's shares for millions of dollars. In the end, remember that life is full of challenges and difficulties, but success comes to those who believe in themselves and persevere in achieving their dreams with resilience and determination. In the film, Chris demonstrates unwavering determination despite all the challenges he faces. The film shows us that even in the toughest circumstances, strong willpower and hard work can achieve goals and dreams. Thanks for watching. Please like, subscribe, and click the bell icon for new movie clips. See you in the next video.